It is now. I seen them push the button up there. Anyway, with my wife, we quit talking. Anyway, I'm Jerry Wagner, like I said, and I've been asked by this church to be the lifestyle leader. And what we decided to do, this is like our kickoff meeting tonight, to bring many speakers here. I talked to ones who, dentists. Have you ever heard a dentist tell you how bad or how good you should take care of your teeth? I got a doctor coming down, going to talk about pain management, and a dietitian, and many other people I've asked they would like to come. And the reason we're doing this here as a church, because we feel like we have the God-given gifts to teach these to our friends and our neighbors, because, everybody lives in this area we care about. And I've been hearing a lot of articles on TV, on the internet, that through our body, our physical conditions determines how we think and what we say. And I've been wondering why they've been making all these poor decisions in areas. And so I said, I really want to talk about that, how your heart and your brain is really connected. Well, you know that when you feel bad or when you get hungry, you get grumpy. And so anyway, I will bring our pastor up, Pastor Manny. He's going to have an opening prayer. And then my wife, Deborah, will introduce our speaker.
I would invite you all to bow your heads as we speak with our Lord. We have a few people coming in now, but we ask you to come on in and let us continue with a word of prayer. Lord in heaven, we want to thank you for this opportunity that you give us to come here. We pray now that as we look at these issues on health, that we may have a clear understanding, for we know that you want us to have good health, you want us to be strong, you want us to live abundant and happy lives. We pray, Father, that we may see clearly today's message and be able to apply it to our lives. We pray this, asking that you may join us in this meeting. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Welcome, everybody. I am so pleased to be able to introduce our speaker to you tonight, Jim Brackett. He's been a friend of ours for a number of years. He has been a health teacher for the better part of his life, I think. And with his degree in public health, a master's in public health, a master's in nuclear physics, he's taught science and not just arithmetic, math. Anyway, he's an amazing guy, and we love him, and so we're really pleased that he's here today. And he's going to present to us the lessons of getting well, staying well, and having amazing brain fitness in the process. So Jim Brackett, please come up, and we turn the mic to you.
6. Count them. 6, 7, 47. Every day, dying in this country from heart disease. 6 of them. And it's 100% preventable. You probably know that heart disease is the #1 killer of people in America. But most people are unaware of the fact or how could prevent all of these deaths. And I'll show you, of course, our topic this evening. Now, we are dying in this country from diseases that are the result, to a great degree, of the fact that we're affluent. We have money to get things that lots of people in the world can't get. And these are all not caused by a germ or a virus. None of these diseases is caused by a germ or a virus. Heart disease, cancer is the next biggest killer. Diabetes is ramping up in this country. About 10 years ago, it was in America that had diabetes. Today, it's 1 person out of 9. The International Diabetes Organization, actually based in Europe, says by 2030, 35, I think it is, we are going to have 1 person out of 4 in this country will have diabetes. Amazing. High blood pressure, as you well know. Obesity is high in this country. It's just remarkable. Arthritis, and all of these diseases are caused by germs? No. No germ, no virus. We don't think much of gout, but this is the list in terms of numbers. Kidney stones, lupus, kidney failure, and of course the list goes on and on. Claudication is a word that you and I don't use very often, but it is a blood clotting in the legs that can kill us, particularly in the legs. Now this man is the father of the... Sure. All this time it's off and you haven't told me that? Please turn it back on, I'll start over. I'm plugged in.
This way they get to hear it.
Okay. No wonder you were being so unresponsive. This is a brand new monitor as of today. So how do you operate it is a good question, right? So my apologies, I didn't even bother to look, I just assumed it would be on. By the way, I'm an old classroom teacher, among other things, and I'm actually quite comfortable with questions. If you would just raise your hand. I might not answer it immediately, but if I point at you, it means I will stop in a moment or right then and deal with the question that came up. So if I point at you and continue my sentence or something, it means I'm coming back to your question. Question number 1 is, why will the screen not work?
It's a little different than any one of it. It doesn't just comment, so input.
Oh, we finally have it. Thank you. Our topic is the heart of the matter. These are the diseases that are not caused by germs. We call them, there's various names, but I've used diseases of affluence. The people in the world that are not that are poor cannot afford to have these diseases. They can't afford it. But of course you and I can. And the father of the modern movement, Dr. John McDougall, was the first one really to write a book that was widely seen by people. He's a physician that began his work in the islands out there, and he found out that the people that were moving to the Hawaiian Islands were well until they stayed there for a while, and then they got sick. In other words, they were poor from their countries, and as they got to the Hawaiian Islands and began to make enough money to buy stuff that's not good for them, they got sick. And he watched this happen and finally wrote a book about it, and is the father of the movement, as I say. A number of physicians, by the way, you may not know this, physicians today, it's just beginning to change, are not taught in medical school about nutrition. And most of them will tell you that this is how much nutrition information they got from their teachers. Now, individually, they could advance themselves in whatever area they wanted to. But McDougall says this about our topic tonight. What percent is preventable? All of it. I need to stop for just a second. There are many, many different kinds of heart conditions or diseases. Many. But the biggest one by far is this thing we call coronary artery disease. And he's talking about that when he says it's preventable. 100% is reversible. We'll look at all of that here briefly tonight. And there's the 747s. Can you believe this, folks? That many people die every day. Disease that is preventable. You all have a relative or a friend that has died of heart disease, virtually. Is that correct? And it's amazing. Now, there is a place in California. Actually, my college roommate was the board chairman when this institute bought from the U.S., from the state of California, about 500 acres of land and opened a lifestyle center. They had physicians, nurses, other kinds of practitioners, of course, people that have to organize and operate and advertise and so forth. And they began to teach people how to do what we just were mentioning, prevent or even reverse these diseases of influence. So many different kinds of heart disease. I've mentioned this, you've heard about this, all kinds of things that can happen to the heart that can be a big problem, but far, far away is the coronary artery, these three arteries that can be blocked and cause almost instant death, in many cases instant death. CAD. Most everyone knows that saturated fat is bad for your heart. How many of you are aware of that? Can I just see your hands if you don't mind, as an old teacher? Some are not looking at me, okay. So Americans naturally then assume that unsaturated fat would be good for you. In fact, you know this. Americans have been told today that the best one of all of those is olive oil. Don't you all know that? You know about that? Unfortunately, folks, it's not true. Not true. And I'm going to show you why, some tonight and some on our other times together. Now, a study, the first study that was ever done in the world on what was causing this and what you might be able to do about it, was actually done in Finland, where they raised lots of cattle and other animals that we use for food. And they went to 2 hospitals. These were hospitals where people were there for long term. And because the people were there for long term, you could study them more easily, if you will. The letters are just the first letter of the name of the hospital. And they found that the death rate from coronary heart disease was about the same in the two hospitals. 13% of the deaths in one of them and around 15 in the other. And they wanted to do some studies to see what might reduce this. And they actually did a dietary intervention. I'm sure you know what that means just from the words. They're going to change what they're eating. And because these people are there long term, these were mental institutions for people struggling with various kinds of mental challenges. So they were there for long term, so you could study them, if you will. And here's what they did. They only made 2 changes in their diet. They took regular cow's milk, took out the fat that's in milk, much of it saturated, and replaced it with soy fat, the same amount, by weight or percentage of calories. Those 2 numbers would be very close to the same. And why did they do that? You all raised your hands. You've heard that saturated fat is bad for your heart, right? And so most of us try to avoid as much as is reasonable or possible. The other thing that they did was they replaced their butter with margarine. Now you might say, what? Margarine's bad for you. Well, they're both bad for you. And the thing is that I think you know this, so forgive me if I'm talking about things that's already familiar to you. Margarine is made from partially unsaturated fat. And so the basic idea would be that if you're replacing some saturated fat with unsaturated fat, which is what you're doing in both of those, is that correct? Part 1 and part 2? Replacing, please note this, replacing some saturated fat with unsaturated fat. And when they did this, here's the results. I put it in the form of a little picture here. On the left, does my arrow come through? Okay, good. Put it in the form this is the amount of cholesterol found in the bloodstream. On the left, does my arrow come through? Okay, good. Put it in the form this is the amount of We're really having fun tonight, aren't we? On the left. How are we doing, guys, up there? Can we stop this repetition? We're really having fun tonight, aren't we? All right. How are we doing, guys, up there? Not too good. Stop this repetition. What do you think, fellas? Do we have a handle on what's causing this feedback? Sounds like it. Okay. So the bar here shows that their cholesterol started out in 240 plus a little maybe. But at the end of a year on this new diet, the cholesterol had dropped substantially. And they then they were looking at the death rates. Now these numbers represent how much cholesterol is in the blood. These numbers represent the death rate, how many people died during the study. And you can see that there was a big drop in death rate and there was a significant drop in how much cholesterol was in their blood. Let me illustrate that by showing you the percentages. 19% decrease in the amount of cholesterol in their blood. And look at this, friends. A 56% decrease in deaths from heart disease just by giving people margarine instead of butter, same amount, and by giving them margarine. Did I say that already? Okay. And so is that a big drop? Is 56% a big drop? It's huge. It's incredible. And so this just hit the screens, if you will, of the medical community back when it was done some years back by a very well-respected group of scientists. It was actually repeated again in this country in a veterans domicile in California. And they did it in a veterans domicile because those men, and there weren't many women in the service at that time, it was a men's domicile for people who had been in the service, and they got about the same result as they did. Yeah. Yeah. I'll get into that. It's a good point, and I will relate to that. So thank you for the question. Now, here is I think you're all familiar with this. Scientists create papers, and then when they do a study, they create these papers, and they could be 10, 20, 30 pages long sometimes. And I'm just taking a couple of quotations out of that study. By the way, Dr. Terpinen was a well-respected and he, of course, had a group of associates who worked with him. Here was his comment. Usually at the very beginning of these scientific studies, there'll be a summary of the study, and often at the end, they'll make another summary of conclusions of one kind or another. He said, "We feel the findings of our study justify the conclusion that in men," remember I told you there weren't very many females at the time in this study, "a cholesterol-lowering diet considerably reduced the mortality from coronary heart disease." Would you agree with that, having seen the numbers? Yeah. And he goes also to say, they also indicate, ... and I'll fill those dots in a minute, that total mortality was favorably affected by this diet. What does he mean? I think you know, but let me just illustrate this. Interestingly enough, those italics in white are mine. But the data also indicate, though not conclusively, if you came up to Deborah and you said, "Sweetheart, I love you, though not conclusively,"
I'm not Deborah.
would you be in trouble?
I'm in trouble now.
This is amazing, friends, because most Americans know that if you replace saturated fat with unsaturated fat, you have less deaths from heart disease. Most Americans know that. Isn't that correct? Don't you folks generally understand that idea? And if you didn't before tonight, you know it now, right? But when you say, though not conclusively, what you mean is the data leaned a little bit in that direction, but not very much. You could not conclude that that was the case. Are y'all with me on this? You know what? You might have to ask 25 doctors about this, and most of them would not know. Amazing, friends. In other words, they're not dying from heart disease, but what? They're dying from something else. Are you tracking with me? If I've lost you, please, folks, don't sit there and be lost. Let me know that I didn't make it clear enough. Let me just expand it a little bit more for you. What is total mortality? I think you know. Let's just say that these are the things that cause people to die. There's many, many more, but just for the sake of illustration. And if you stack them all up together, that would be total mortality. And we might just use a single bar to say that's the total mortality. And so if heart disease death rate decreased some, you would expect total mortality to go down. But according to what we just read, did it go down? Not conclusively. There might have been a tiny dip or something, but you could not conclude that the total mortality dropped because of this study. And how many Americans would you have to walk down the street and stop and ask this question before they would know this? Before you could find some person that would know what I've just shown you? I bet you'd have to ask 100 people before they would. Yes, I'm aware of that. Are y'all with me on what I'm saying? Are we uninformed people in general on these topics? It's astonishing, friends, how uninformed, to our detriment, we are. Now, the replacement studies conducted in Finland, I told you, were repeated in Los Angeles. About the same. They showed a 50% decrease in CAD deaths. And most of you are not interested, but the issues are here for you to look them up if you wanted to go to the library and read about them for some reason. but it was cancer. I meant to ask you before I put it on the screen. What do you think increased in death rate after so much of a decrease in heart disease occurred? What is it on the screen? What is it? Pardon me? No, what? Yeah, it was cancer that was increased by the use of oil. How many Americans would you have to ask that would know that? Cancer is rampant, friends, to a great degree because of Americans have been told that these unsaturated fats are good for you. Rampant increase in cancer, friends. A big decrease in heart disease was replaced by death rates from cancer. Y'all with me on this, friends? Amazing. And it's just astonishing to me. This is not some idea of mine, friends. This research is well known by scientists. The physicians aren't taught much about this. And here's what I was going to tell you. The place in California, remember that? It's my college roommate was the board chairman. There was 4 or 5 physicians, a number of nurses, other healthcare providers that got together and raised the money and bought this land and started a health improvement teaching program. And they called it, there's a little town there, hardly more than a post office. It's about 50 miles east of Sacramento up there on Interstate 80. And it's the little town. The post office is called Weimar. And so this thing became Weimar Institute. Some of you I know have heard about that place. And right now, you can go there and pay about $6,000. It's pretty cheap. Some of the others that are operated by other people are much higher. But you can pay $6,000 and spend 18 days there. And the physicians and the other caregivers will teach you how to get well from your diseases. Now, I have actually been a guest lecturer with their physicians for close to 30 years. And I can't believe it's already been 10 years ago. The physician, who was the president at that time of Weimar Institute, called me up and asked me if I would come and be the vice president for a couple of years because he was going to be the brand new director, but he had a big medical practice in Oklahoma that he would have to stop, and he couldn't give much time to Weimar during those, during about 2 years that he thought it would take him to close his practice. And I won't get into the story, but I ended up, Neva, of course, my wife Neva went with me, and for 2 years I was the boss on the campus of 88 employees. They actually operated a grade school and a high school and a college, and it has become a university. They have a number of master's degrees in the world of health, wellness, if you will. So I was there for 2 years, and about 15 to 25 people would show up every 3 weeks as the next group and as the VP, and the physician that was the president. Some of you would know the name Neil Nedley. He was busy closing his practice. I was running the program. And he would come and spend a weekend once a month at least, sometimes twice a month. So I would meet with the guests each time. We'd have a circle there. People don't have to tell why they're there. Most of them are kind of interested in doing that and listening to others. And I'd sit there and listen to them tell about their problems that they hope they could get well from. Heart disease, diabetes, those are the big ones. Arthritis, pretty close in there, and so on. Obesity, huge. Probably 80% of the people that would come to these programs, besides other problems, were overweight. And then 2.5 weeks later, on Wednesday night, there would be the graduation. And then after that, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the whole team of workers, physicians, nurses, and so forth, would have a little break, if you will, before the next group arrived Sunday evening. And it was an amazing story. These people they are well after 2.5 weeks. Their diabetes is gone, friends. You can actually get people completely cured from their diabetes in several days. I wish you all would have kind of gasped. If that's true, isn't that amazing? Yes. And they would tell their story, whatever it was, whether it was some heart condition or lupus or whatever, and the tremendous improvements they had. And essentially, folks, what you do with these people is you put them on what we call a whole plant regimen. Now, we don't use the vegan word because you can be a junk food vegan. I mean, after all, French fries and potato chips are vegan, aren't they? Aren't they? Yeah. Sure. So the proper term, if you're interested in it, is a whole plant. Whole means we're not refining stuff. We're going to eat the whole edible portion. So a plant-based regimen plus activity. It depends on their condition, but we had a fellow there there's a really cute picture while I was there. I think they had 13 boys hanging around him, and his weight was equal to the sum of those 13 boys, and they took a picture of it. He was close to 600 pounds. And we have them walk. If they have such difficulty with their health, even if they just can barely do this, we have them do this. And every day we try to get it to be more, and so forth. Activity is a huge issue in being well, as you know. So there's other issues we talk about. We talk about psychological issues and various other things. But the big issue, folks, is what people are eating and how active they are or are not. So here I am at the end of the 2.5 weeks. I give a little talk because I'm the vice president, and they get up and tell their stories. Amazing. You can't believe it, friends. These people are just walking on air. They can't believe it. Their diabetes is gone. The average decrease in pain from arthritis is 50%, up to 90 and as low as 10. But virtually everybody is better, and a lot of them are way, way better with arthritis. And they're going to do it. They're going to go home and do this. Would you like to guess what percentage actually go home and stay on the program? 1 out of 10. It's a heartbreak because they went there and they got well. I watched this for 2 years. And I was very familiar with the program anyway from before and later. But if you walked out of this place tonight and said to yourself, I'm going to do that, would it be easy? Probably not. Forgive me, I'm going to advertise my wife's cookbook. Actually, she's the author of 3 cookbooks. The latest book she wrote, which has now been a number of years back, not that many years, has sold 300,000 copies. And all the recipes in her books are whole plant recipes. And you can talk to, I guarantee you. But by the way, just a little bit of an aside here. When I retired back in 1999, I actually was working in Reno for 7 years. I retired. And where's Neva? Where you at, dear? Didn't we go there in 06, wasn't it? It was 06. And we decided to open our own little lifestyle program. We bought property that on purpose I could build some cottages for guests. And for years, we operated a 6-day, residential would be the proper term. Some people call it a live-in. And we had the same experience. Neva and I thought, because her food is so good. Now, when you eat food at an institution, it's fair. It's fair, but nothing like Neva's food. How many in this room have ever eaten at Neva's table? Can I see your hands just for fun? Hold them up. Only 2? 3? At a cooking class once. And you talk to anybody that has eaten her food. I don't want to embarrass her because she's a gracious woman. But God has blessed her. I think these people that raise their hands would agree with me. Her food is fabulous. And it completely follows a whole plant regimen. I don't know that one person out of 50, 70 would come to our place and say, I don't know about this food. They love her food. So it can be done. Do you suppose it's a little more work? Yeah. Almost anything you buy in a store, folks, that somebody processed has got big problems. It's just the way it is. And now, if you're real careful when you shop, you can do pretty well. So, big increase in cancers. Now, the calories that you get from fat in America, on average, is represented by this red bar. I mean by the whole bar. Guess what the red portion of the bar is referring to? That's the saturated fat you and I are getting, and this is the unsaturated fat. This is roughly what is going on in America, and this second bar is what the study did with these people to see if you could get them to have less heart disease. Remember, they replaced the margarine, the butter with margarine, and they replaced the milk fat with plant fat. And pretty good reduction. Now what's happening here is the death rate increases if they don't follow the program. So I'm not too much worried about talking about that, but this bar represents what the American Heart Association says you should do. You should get very little what? And most of the fat that you do get, which should be less than 30% of your total calories, are what? Unsaturated. And I have a lecture on that's titled, just the whole story about fat. We don't have time to do that. I have a whole long series of lectures to cover each of these topics. But in any case, what they did was they got the people's fat intake down to 30%. And a very small amount of it would be saturated fat. If you follow the American Heart Association recommendations, whether or not you have heart disease, this is their recommendation. Now, do you remember when you learned that walnuts were good for the heart? Remember that? Now, it turns out that the scientist that did that study is a friend of mine. We both went to the same university for our degrees. His name is Sabate, Dr. Sabate. And he found out that if you, watch this, if you replace, big important word, if you replace some of the fat in people's diet with the same amount of fat by giving them almost any kind of nut, it's not just walnuts, it's any nut. And by the way, the nuts are high in fat, so it's kind of an easy way to get a study that gives you results pretty quickly. It could be any plant. You could do this with any plant. By the way, what would be your opinion? Are there some plants out there that don't have any fat in them? What do you think? Let's take a vote. Let's not study, let's just take a vote. How many think there are plants out there with no fat in them? Can I see your hands? A good number of you. You're all incorrect. Every plant on the earth has fat in it. There are some that are high, some that are low, but they all have some fat. And so it wasn't just walnuts. What was happening is, and by the way, it had to be replacement. You know what the average American does that heard about walnuts? They have the same food before, and then they pour nuts on it because those nuts are good for you. And guess what? They are worse off than they were. Are y'all with me on that? Just too much fat can be a problem. even if it comes from plants. So here are the studies that were done. Now, a number of different places did these studies, and these are the results. And I meant to just point instead of flat. So let's just say that this is the standard American situation. But if you give them nuts 4 times a week, there's less heart disease. The yellow represents less than the heart disease that everybody gets that's just a normal person. You all with me on this? Everybody? Okay? So, and if you get nuts less than once a week, that's hardly measurable. And if you get nuts almost every day, look, friends, at the decrease in deaths from heart disease. Is that a big deal? It's a huge deal. Now, it's you understand this is replacement. You don't add the nuts to their terrible diet. You take some of the fat in their diet and replace it with the fat from the nuts. Doesn't matter if they're cooked or raw. Good question. Doesn't matter. Good point. And it works for men. Just notice this decreasing distance is kind of what we're just glancing at. Works for women. If you're young, I don't know if you know this little symbol in mathematics means less than or more than. So it works for young people, works for older people. Y'all with me in what I'm trying to describe? I don't want to take too much time. It works if you're a vegetarian. Are y'all with me on this? You know, they're a little better, they're better off than the people who are not vegetarians. It works for people who don't get much exercise. Not a lot, but is there some decrease there just because of the nuts? Even if they're not getting much exercise. And if they get a lot of exercise, is it a little better? Yeah, but not a great deal, let's just say. But it's better. And notice this. Even people who are overweight, do they get a benefit if they eat nuts? And remember, this is replacement. This isn't just adding it. You're all with me on that? Okay. So body mass index is a way, I'm sure you're familiar with this to some degree, that we measure if somebody's overweight. And so if they have a body mass index of 24 or less, we say that they're normal weight. And if their body mass index is above 24, we say, well, you're overweight to some degree, depending. So that's, and by the way, these last several pages that I've showed you with these bars is the summation, if you will, finally, of a lot of different universities that did nut studies to see what would happen with people's health. Now, one day, Dr. Sabate was giving a lecture at a big university on his study. And I learned about it, and I arranged for myself to be there. And there was about 300 scientists that showed up to listen to him tell about this amazing thing that nuts were helping people be well. And so here he is explaining, you know what we're talking about with this word, don't you? Same amount of fat that they add in with plant fat is taken out, a replacement. And in fact, I had the nerve, for some reason he didn't mention that. And so at the end of his lecture, then there's this Q&A time, and I had the nerve to stand up among all 300 of these scientists and say, Dr. Sabate, were these replacement? Oh, he said, oh yes. Although interesting, he hadn't even mentioned it. But anyway, replacement means that what I've described, I won't describe it again for you. And this fellow says, Doctor, should I eat the diet before or after meals? Listen, I won't take the time to tell you the story, but that's more than that. You know, that's funny, but that's real. Americans believe that this food should be added to what they already have, and it might help a little bit, but it's actually in general going to be worse. I think you can see that very easily. Now, here's a quick painting or a quick look at a painting of the gallbladder, which is a place where fats are stored where bile is stored until it's needed somewhere. And this is the bile duct, and the bile comes from the liver and passes on into the small intestine just an inch or so past the bottom of the stomach. And if the bile isn't needed, the body uses bile to help digest fat. And if for some reason there's more bile there than was needed, it gets pushed up into the gallbladder. That's how that happens. And right here is where it gets dumped into the small intestine to help in the digestive process of the fat. So the cholesterol connection is this. The liver makes this bile, which is needed to help digest fat. The liver increases the amount of bile if there's more saturated fat in the diet. Bile is almost pure what? So this business of getting the body to make a lot more bile because I'm eating more fat, is that a good idea? No, it's not. Because it just increases the cholesterol in our bodies. For most Americans, the bile is reabsorbed into the bloodstream. Down near the end, the ileum is the last 12 inches of the small intestine. And so it gets back in the blood and is a problem, as you can see, I think. So raising the amount of cholesterol found in the blood, or it does increase the amount of cholesterol found in the blood. So that's the connection between the way we're preparing our food and how it can still cause us problems, even though we eat more plants. And of course, you get more heart disease as a result. The lifetime risk, now this word, you and I don't use it, ischemic, it just means a narrowing. The lifetime risk of ischemic heart disease was reduced by approximately 31% in the people who ate the nuts most. And actually, male vegetarians, in comparison, 31% of those who consume nuts frequently, and by 37% of male vegetarians who compared with non-vegetarians. They were helped. So the higher consumption of fruit was associated with lower risks of lung, prostate, pancreatic cancers, and so on. Every time you see people make changes away from animal products. Listen, folks, I was raised on a ranch. We had only 12 cattle. We had 5,000 chickens. And so we had all the T-bone steaks we wanted. My stepfather and I cooked a T-bone steak over the coals in the fireplace several nights during the week. I think most of you are aware of this, but it's like Americans don't know it. And I used to be a chemistry teacher. I'd love to give you more. Let me just say this much. You take fat and you heat it to high temperatures, like when that fat drips off that steak down onto those coals or onto those hot charcoals, you increase the temperature by 1,000 to 1,500 degrees, and you create absolutely hundreds and even thousands of chemicals in a instant because of that high temperature, and most of them are bad for you. It's just crazy, friends, how we Americans, and I didn't know any better. My stepfather didn't know any better. Guess about, we had plenty of eggs, you understand, right, with 5,000 chickens. And my job as a kid was we had chickens in big chicken houses, and these shells with grain, and you run down there and just run your hands through the grain, and you keep bumping into eggs, because that's, the word chickens like to lay their eggs in grain. And so it's no wonder that I ended up with some problems in my health, although my wife and I have lived like what we're teaching for about 58 years. And we have been greatly blessed because of it. So the U.S. Surgeon General, can you believe this, friends? This is amazing. 50 years ago, we had no data for this. He just could see it in his scientific grasp of things, that he thought you could virtually prevent coronary artery disease by putting people on a better lifestyle. Y'all with me on the idea? Amazing. And it turns out to be true. In fact, not almost. It's entirely preventable. It's just astonishing. Not a germ. Now, this is a drawing of an artery. I don't know if you know this, friends, but you don't die. Nobody dies of a clot forming in a vein from your lifestyle. This happens in arteries. This is a drawing of an artery. Let me just quickly show you what's kind of presented here. That's a muscle, an outer muscle, and then there is an inner muscle, and then there's a lining 1 cell thick. You put a scope in there, you don't even see that lining, because 1 cell is so narrow, but it's there. And that layer has a name, and when we form plaque, aren't you familiar with that term? When our body makes plaque in our coronary arteries, it doesn't form in here. It forms under that layer. Interesting. And I'll show you actual pictures of it in a moment. We call that, we have different names for it, but it's a plaque. You know that word, we use it. And what can happen is this. The lining, 1 cell thick, protects you from getting a heart attack. Follow me on this. Only 1 heart attack out of 100 occurs because the vessel filled with plaque, like in this picture. What happens is, only 1 out of 100. What happens is that lining becomes unhealthy because of the way we eat and live, and that exposes this plaque to the blood, and in an instant, that exposure causes a blood clot to fill the artery. Most Americans you're all aware of the fact that people go to the heart surgeon and they'll put a stent in there to do what? To keep the vessel open. What percentage of heart attacks occur because the vessel closed because of plaque? Only 1 out of 100, only 1%. The rest of them occur because of a blood clot that occurred because that lining allowed the exposure to, do I show it very clearly here? You can see where the lining, somebody else drew this picture. The lining became unhealthy, and so this stuff is exposed to the blood, and when that happens, it will make a blood clot that fills this portion up. So only 1 out of 100 heart attacks is this filling up the artery. It's amazing. The average American believes that if you can just get stents wherever you have this stuff, you'll be all right. It's false, friends. It's amazing, an amazing story. Let me show you another interesting thing. We call this, I think you know this, we call this an atherosclerosis, which simply means hard or mushy, like mush. And athero just means it was in the arteries in your heart. Atherosclerosis, you all know the word. Now, a fellow by the name of Ornish, Dr. Dean Ornish, I have tremendous respect for this guy. You could not get money, friends, to do studies because everybody knew what's already known and nothing else is to be learned, but he managed to get some money, and what he did was he put a group of, he used men because in the early days the women had almost a tiny fraction of the of the deaths were from heart disease for women. He put them on a diet to lower the amount of cholesterol or buildup in their arteries. And I just used this same picture to give you an idea. This is 40%. This thing is probably more like 60, but I'm trying to just illustrate that these men came to him with this amount of cholesterol, of buildup in their arteries. He put them on a better diet. And this was against all, everybody knew you couldn't get the plaque to go away. Everybody knew that. And somehow he managed to get enough money to do a study and showed that you could reduce the amount of plaque in that guy's, in the 3 arteries in the heart by how much? Is that significant? Yeah, it was going away just because of how he fed them. And what he fed them was a plant regimen. And as a result of that, by the way, this was published at the bottom there. There are 2 of the most famous places to put your studies in the world. One is in London, and the other is in the U.S., the American Heart Association. And what he found was, in the control group, that he didn't make them eat the way these guys had to eat. What happened to them? Notice that this one is about the same height as that one. Are you with me on that? They were about the same. You just randomly choose people and separate them into these studies. But these same people, they were mostly Americans, but it was here in this country where he did the study, their plaque increased during the 12-month study. And everybody knew you couldn't do this before Ornish did it. That's why I have such respect for him, to go find the money to do a study to show that you can make plaque do what? Go away. Yes. Oh, the so-called statins. It's a good question. Let me get to it if I get a chance. Medicine is not the answer, friends. And I think you guys know that statins are bad for you. One of them was taken off the market after just a year or so because it was killing people. Another one was taken off the market or told you got to use this under very special conditions. It's bad stuff. Those statins are bad for your muscles and various things. But, remember, what percentage of the people would go home from Weimar and stay on the program? 1 out of 10. So don't throw rocks at the people who are saying, look, if you change your diet, you'll get some improvement, even though most of the people won't do it. Just think, ladies, since most of the cooks in this room are probably females, but whoever's the cook in your home, just think, what would you do to go home and never use any oil again in any of your recipes? Would it be a big deal? Yeah. But it's getting easier because of all the studies that have been done by Dr. Ornish and a number of other people. But people go, listen, those people whose graduation I attended, I told you, didn't I say, they're going to go do it. And they mean it. But, and when my wife and I started our 6-day, instead of 18 days, we did a 6-day program, Sunday through Friday. We thought, this special treatment we're going to give these people, we have the same results. People come back to us, we bump into them sometime. Yeah, they followed it for a while, but everything you buy, friends, 98% of the bread you buy in the store has oil in it. And here's the problem, friends. You take these oil molecules, the tiniest chunk of oil you can think of, right? And you heat it up, it becomes toxic. It causes cancer. Remember me saying that? A huge increase in cancer because of the oils. Both of the studies found that. Decrease in coronary artery disease deaths, but just as much cancer to kill people as they were saved from by less heart attacks. Y'all with me on the idea? And again, how many people would you have to ask about that know what I just described? It's not known, is it? The people are not taught that. It's crazy. It's coming slowly, but it's Amazing. So the controls got sicker and sicker. Another hand? Go ahead. Ah, good question. Thank you. Coconut oil, but I should lecture with notes, shouldn't I? Saturated fat, and I have a whole lecture on this, which we're not going to have time to deal with, but what it means is there's a little place where you can hook some carbon atoms on oil. And when all the spots that you could hook it on there, I say you could hook it on there, nature does this. When they're all hooked up with carbon atoms, the fat is saturated. You couldn't make any more carbon atoms stick to it. And it's solid at room temperature. Coconut, is it solid at room temperature? Well, that's a tricky one because it's so close to room temperature. But coconut is 96% saturated fat. So we should all be using less fat. Are y'all with me on that? A lot less. And if possible at all, it can be done. We're not selling any cookbooks tonight because it's our Sabbath, but starting tomorrow night and the next night, if you want to buy one, they'll be available. And the problem is that when you have these fats that are saturated, they just simply make the body make more cholesterol. And so you get more heart disease because of the increased cholesterol. So now where did we go with that? What about coconut? Yeah. So we don't use any oil, folks, in any of our recipes. That sound crazy? And even, it's all in the book. It's easy to follow, different than everybody does. Now, sometimes we'll use just a little bit of oil to grease a cookie sheet. I really like it when Neva doesn't even do that. Because when you heat stuff, folks, let me give you an example. You raise the temperature of something by 10 degrees, and the chemistry that takes place, whatever chemistry is going on, will double in its speed. How much happens? When you take oil, which is unsaturated, is some of the oil in that plant saturated? Say yes. But most of the oil is unsaturated in most plants. And you put it in the frying pan so you can saute, or whatever you're going to do, and you raise that fat from room temperature. Maybe it was even cooler in the fridge, but at room temperature, that fat is oxidizing. Oxygen is connecting to it and making it bad for you. When you pour that oil in that frying pan and raise that frying pan up to 450 degrees, you increase the oxidization rate of that oil by 2 million times. It is insane, friends, the way Americans live. In all of Neva's recipes, we saute with water. Would that be the right term, sweetheart? Saute means in oil. That's the problem. Pardon me, dear? With water. Yeah. Go ahead. I won't let her put oil on the pan or she goes to jail. No, it would be coconut. Why coconut? Because it's saturated. And, well, 96% saturated. You want to comment on that briefly, dear? You use water, what shall I say, most of the time? Rub a little oil? Just a smidgens. Yeah. So the coconut oil is so much saturated, which has its problems, right, if you eat a lot of it especially. Heating it is not going to do anything much because it's 96% saturated already. Yeah. A little. So we use, there's no fat added in Neva's recipes. It's amazing. You talk to anybody that's eaten at her table. How many? I asked you that already. They'll tell you the food is fabulous. And go ahead, dear, then I'll come back here. Oh, we use yeah. There are 4 plant foods that are high in fat. You know what they are? Olives, avocados, nuts, and seeds. All the rest of the plants on the planet are very low in fat. And if you're not a believer, accept my apology. I think God understood that the best thing for people was unsaturated fat. And not much of it. But we're killing ourselves with the fat that we eat. And it's hard to make changes and stick with them. I mean, these people leave our place, they're going to do it. Listen, I had a man come into our class. It's been a couple of years ago. His blood pressure, as we say, was off the chart. His A1C, you know what that is about diabetes. He was way up there. And he had neuropathy. Most of you know about diabetic neuropathy. And usually starts in the feet, sometimes the hands first, but usually the feet first. He came in there. People come to our place Sunday around 2, 3 in the afternoon. He walked into the lecture room. I do 3 lectures a day. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there was 2 more lectures to go. And he said to me, I'll try to get the right inflection. He said, my neuropathy's getting better? What does the doctor, and don't throw rocks at the doctor, what does the doctor tell the average diabetic about their neuropathy? Never get better. It will just slowly get worse and worse. And, but that's not the case. And don't throw rocks at the doctors. Why bother the doctors teaching people to do something different if they're not going to do it? That fair enough? Right? So he walks into the same classroom Thursday afternoon. Blood pressure normal? Now, A1C changes slowly. But his neuropathy, listen to this, friends, his neuropathy was completely gone. 4 days. And we see it all the time. It's amazing what you can do if you are determined. And you know what? I don't even have a copy here. About 1/3 of Neva's cookbooks are desserts. You know why? Because her husband likes desserts. But they're healthy desserts. Are y'all with me? Does that mean I could just live on those desserts? That wouldn't be smart because desserts are higher in fat sort of naturally, but it's the proper kind of fat. Y'all with me on this? So the kids come running into her kitchen for cookies all the time. So where was it? Was it your hand? Uh-huh. Oh, a fair question, and my apologies for not repeating the questions for the people who are watching. Wouldn't someone start craving for meat before long? Sure, but the craving will go away. I'm a testimony. I was raised on a ranch. And I'm a testimony because Neva and I have served hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in our own program. And I told you I was the boss at Weimar for 2 years. And all those people, same situation. But it's a tough thing to stay on it. I shouldn't tell you that. I should pretend like you just go home and do this. No problem, right? I'm sorry, dear, please. Oh, yeah. I'm going to repeat that. She's going to do a sample tomorrow night that would kind of look like a meatball, and it maybe taste a little bit like one. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm just telling you, folks, if you're interested, and you find people that have eaten at her table, I don't think you'll ever find a single difference. They'll tell you the food is fabulous. Does it take a little more work to make it, dear? Say yes. Yeah. 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 It makes cooking a lot more fun? How is that? Ah. You can't hear what she's saying, correct? Is that what you said? I should repeat it. She said, we should have a microphone for the rest of these, not now because we're done now, but let's have a microphone in Neva's hands so she can pop in with these remarks, which are very helpful and important. She gets calls from all over the world, folks. What about that recipe on page so-and-so? And I just love it. I just love it because she just always knows the answer. It's just crazy. Of course, she's been doing it now, folks, for 58 years.
What about that very popular high-protein, no carb diet?
Yeah,
where you
good
lose a lot of
question.
weight
Good question. And I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be here enough to do lectures like I have 21 lectures that I normally use to, but high protein is bad for you? Thank you, dear. She said, what about the so-called high protein diets that you could use them and you get well? It's high carb. Oh, folks, I don't have the time. Listen. Yeah. Yeah. It turns out you cannot give people enough sugar to make them diabetic. It is not sugar, and I will show you a clip on this tomorrow night. Tomorrow night? Yeah. You cannot give them enough sugar to make them have diabetes. Well, you say it's sugar diabetes, isn't it? Yeah, that's the name. But carbohydrate is perfect fuel. Not when you buy it in a package that somebody made, but when you burn carbohydrate, you know what you get? When you burn it in your cells. Every cell in your body has a furnace, that's a metaphor, that burns the four things that give you energy. And when they burn fat, you get carbon dioxide and water and energy. Pure. No smoke in the chimney. Carbohydrate is perfect fuel. And most of the calories in the plants out there are carbohydrate. Did you know that? There's fat in all the plants, usually quite low. There's only 4 categories of plants that are high in fat. What are they? Olives, avocados, nuts, and seeds, right? All the rest of the plants, low in fat, high in carbohydrate. Perfect food, except when people process it. Now, there was another hand that I pointed at. Was it? Yes. Yeah. His question is, aren't all of these products you can buy that are so-called plant-based, and aren't they high in fat? And generally that's the case. And so you need to learn to read labels, and if there's any fat added, in my opinion, don't buy it. It's bad for you. Those fats are bad, friends. You take unsaturated fat and expose it to air, you get toxic stuff that causes what? Cancer. It's a big deal. Yeah. And of course, Americans, they go by taste. They don't worry about what's in the label. I got to quit this, don't I? Let me see if there's any more notes here. Oh! You got to see this. Okay. On the American Heart Association diet, this is what your doctor tells you to eat if you got heart disease. You get sicker or better? You get worse on the American Heart Association diet. Crazy. Now, these pictures were given to me through Dr. William Costelli. I'd love to take the time. These are actual photographs, an artery taken out of a person that died from heart disease, sliced off, and a picture. And so what you have here is, there's the inside of the artery. This is plaque. That's plaque. This is the plaque that has not yet hardened. The body, when you start making plaque in your arteries, the body is racing to change that plaque from soft to hard, because it's the soft plaque, friends, that causes the heart attack. That soft plaque gets kind of chucked into the lining here and there, and that's just That's just a perfect place to start a heart attack, is that soft, fat plaque there in the lining. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to do that in a second here. So this thing right in here is the portion that the body has not yet made into hard plaque. So I said a moment ago as I walked around that the body is racing to change all the plaque you make from soft into hard, because hard plaque only causes what percentage of heart attacks? 1. Got it? Y'all with me? Nod your heads to tell me yes. Okay? So there's that soft plaque that the body is struggling to make into hard plaque. There's the soft plaque. I'm sorry, that's just the opening where the blood is still flowing, forgive me. And here is another photograph of the artery cut off, and you're looking at the end of it. I think you can see right away that's the outside of the artery. And this is the open place where blood is still moving. And guess what that is? Soft plaque, and the body is racing to try to make it hard like the rest of this plaque. And the fact that this thing is so close to that lining, can you see the 1 cell thick lining in this picture? Remember? It has a name, the name's not important. So the body is struggling to get all this plaque, soft plaque, turned into hard plaque. And the soft plaque is where the clot of blood forms that does 99% of the heart attacks. This person died, and you can see this was the place where blood was still flowing. All this is hard plaque. And some of the soft plaque oozed out of its little containment and caused this blood clot to form like in several seconds. Are y'all with me? And it even caught some of the plaque in the clot. Got that? You're not nodding. Okay? I see some eyes that are closed, but thank you. Most of you have kept your eyes open. I appreciate that. If you were students in my classes in high school, I would make you keep your eyes open. Okay. I'm just doing this because sometimes if I don't have my pointer available, I do that. That's some soft plaque, by the way. That's the soft plaque right there that caused this clot to form and kill this person. Okay. This is the American Heart Association diet, remember? You cut the total fat down to 30% of your calories. If you use Neva's cookbook, you will cut the fat intake down to 10% of your calories. And most of it will be, it's so small it's not an issue, but a little bit will be saturated. Most of it will be unsaturated. So it's just amazing, friends. I taught nutrition, college nutrition, for 10 years. And these kids, if they wanted to, could eat at Neva's table. Didn't have to at all. And I found at the end of 1 month, they had to choose where they were going to eat and stay with it. A little study, if you will. I found that their fat intake was 20%, and a fairly tiny percent was saturated. So it's just like, you just like guarantee that people are not going to die of a heart attack. Now here's the thing. Do you think a bunch of you in this room have some soft plaque exposed somewhere in your coronary arteries? Say yes. If you made this change in your food preparation, that soft plaque would become safe in a day or two. Amazing. Amazing. The body doesn't care if there's hard plaque there as long as it can make all of the soft plaque hard. Long term, maybe absorb some of it. But body's amazing, making hard plaque to try to save you from a heart attack. Yes, dear. The opening is not narrower. It's just changed it from soft to hard. You follow her question? She said, isn't it bad to have that hard plaque that soft plaque made into hard plaque? No, because what causes 99% of the heart attacks is when the plaque is soft, right? So even if my artery is partly closed and I have trouble walking up a long hill or something, at least the plaque is hard and it's not going to cause a heart attack. Yes? Yeah, activity is good in 100 ways, but the size of the artery is not a great big issue. What's killing people is not smaller arteries, it's blood clots that form on the soft plaque. Yeah. I think we should quit, don't you? Do you want to say goodbye to them till tomorrow night?
Well, what do you think? Oh. And, you know, as a church, we're hoping to make our community more healthy. I was in the emergency room the other day, and I asked them, how many patients you have a day? Oh, way over 150. And then I went to the pharmacy and said, how many customers come in a day? Oh, we can't even count them. So people are sick, and you have to make the change, or we have to make the change. But if you bring some people tomorrow night, you know, we need young people in here. Got all these, well, it's going away. I usually could pull it up. But anyway, this is why we brought Jim Brackett here, because he explains things where even I can understand them. And so, well, go home, think about these things, go through your cabinets. No.
If you're interested, and I haven't even told the people here yet, because I counseled with my wife and she suggested I change. I'm going to do a lecture on the human brain tomorrow.
Ooh.
Pretty interesting. Now, it has some spiritual components to it. I don't think you'll be offended about that. But, Ben Carson is a friend of mine. I'll have a little thing that we did together about memory in the brain and so forth. If you're interested, I'll probably be talking from about 11:30 to 4 in the afternoon, something like that.
Well, it may not be here. You can talk all you want. We may not be here.
Yeah.
It's not good for the brain.
Yeah. Anyway, if you're interested. Okay. Air fryers, very good idea, because we're not really frying. You're not pouring oil. Well, you shouldn't be pouring oil on it. You're just warming it. Neva can talk about air fryers all evening, and she's just, yeah. Great way to do it. Great way to do it. Okay.
Well, you know, when you mentioned brain, when I was back in 1974, I started learning about changing my diet. I said, what good would it do? I said, well, it helped your brain. I'm on board, I said.
Yeah, amen.
I said, I'm on board. And that was in 74, and I've had a very happy life ever since. And so we need to teach our neighbors. I don't know about you folks, but Deborah and I have the best neighborhood in town. And I'm not going to tell you where it is because we got enough people there. Have a good night. let's have a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for giving us this ability to listen and learn how we can take care of the body that you created, and keep us safe tonight and bring us back tomorrow night. Good night. Amen.
Okay. Of course. Can you tell I'm an old classroom teacher? I take questions all day.